Baruch Mar Rabi Qasha, Father Peter Patros from the Chaldean Catholic Church. Thank you so much for coming on. You are, I'm pretty sure, the first clergy ever on the Lion's Den. So thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, Rabbi.
Oh, thanks be to God, and thank you for having me, Shamasha.
So today we're going to talk about the Chaldean Catholic Rite. Before this, whenever the Chaldean Rite would be mentioned, it would be mentioned in passing as one of the family members of Syriac Rite Christianity. The Chaldean Catholic Church is part of the East Syriac Rite, the Church of the East. For anyone who doesn't know, and I want, because where I live, there's a very dense Chaldean Catholic community. It might be the biggest or the second biggest among the Syriac Mesopotamian churches, so not counting the Maronites. And I think it is important for people to know about it, that it exists, to know about its traditions, and that's why I wanted to have you on, Robbie. If you can give us kind of maybe an intro about the Chaldean Rite, uh, maybe a little bit about its history. We'll go into details throughout the episode. I'll ask you maybe about some hymns or some saints or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you again for bringing me on.
Mm,
The Chaldean Catholic Church exists as one of the three different, I guess you could say, uh, branches, you could say, of the Church of the East. In the Church of the East, we can say, begins with Jesus Christ himself, along with all the different liturgical and apostolic churches that exist. Specifically, this one exists with a troublemaker, St. Thomas the Apostle, who they call him the doubter. I like to think of him as Thomas the wounded, right? Who
mm,
comes into close contact with Jesus's wounds, and probably one of the closest to ever get to Jesus's heart. And in encountering Jesus in this most intimate way, he continues on and spreads the message of the gospel, sows the seed of the gospel into Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, Syria, Iran, Turkey, which is kind of the concentration of, you could say, the heart or libba of where our church kind of was born and began its missionary work through the rest of the East. Then St. Thomas there had apostles with him, or disciples, you could say. We have Marmari, and then you have Mar-Adde, which some believe to be it's Jude Thaddeus, either one of the 72 or one of the 12. Don't ask me, I don't know. So uh, those were the two, Mar'adde Marmari, who established one of the most ancient liturgies, you could say Eucharistic prayers or anaphoras of the church, which we still pray in today. We have two other anaphoras in the church, but that's sort of the main one that both ourselves and the Church of the East and Ancient Church of the East, or Assyrian Church of the East and Ancient Church of the East use. And Thomas
Beautiful.
continued on to India, where he established what's today the Syro-Malabar Church, which was, I believe, under the jurisdiction of the Chaldean Catholic Church and the Assyrian Church of the East. Um, well, the Syro-Malabar Church was under the Chaldean Catholic Patriarch up until they kind of became autocephalous, where they just have a major archbishop now who serves kind of like a patriarch. But yeah.
So, in the Syriac Orthodox narrative of the story, we have Mar Edday to be one of the 72, but also he was the twin brother of St. Thomas in our
Oh,
tradition. Yeah, because
that's
as you
that's
know,
interesting. That's news to me.
yeah, Martoma is it wasn't his name. Toma, it's a nick. It's a because he's a twin.
Tioma, which
Yeah,
means twin. Yeah.
yeah. So, his it was like by calling him Toma, they were just saying, "Oh, that's the guy with the twin." Right?
Well,
It's not really
they
his.
probably had the same barber, and they probably had the same lineup, and they probably all looked alike because of that.
And then for India, so Martoma, when he gets there, he does he establishes what is like the Indian, the Martoma Christians. So right now they're divided into multiple sects, right? So then there's the Syro Malabar that you said, or the Chaldean Syrian Church under the Syrian Church of the East, and then there's the Indians that are under the Syriac Orthodox
Correct.
patriarch. Yeah. Rabi, I'm sorry to bother you. There's an echo on your side. I'm hearing myself back.
Oh,
So
yeah.
sorry.
Let me see. Mm, let's try now. Is it better?
Test one, two. Yeah. No echo. Perfect.
Okay. I just did echo cancellation. Okay.
Beautiful. So with that, then in the Chaldean, right before you were on, by the way, Pierre Yonan, who you know, he was on right like 30 minutes ago. We just wrapped up. We were live.
Mm-hmm.
He had just come back from Iraq. He saw Rabban Hermes and he saw Marmetti and he saw all of these places. Now, um, the Chaldean church, in terms of its kind of its headquarters or its center, it's based in Iraq, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And it's based in Ankawa or where is it?
It's based technically now in Baghdad.
Okay. Okay. So and that institution, you know, according to its tradition, it comes from Martoma, it comes from Maradde and Marmari, all the way coming down. You mentioned the anaphoras, I think. We also have the anaphora of Maradde in the Syriac Orthodox, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, some things are made of the intercommunion agreement between the Chaldean Catholic Church and the Assyrian Church of the East because of the shared anaphora.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in your experience as a priest in the Chaldean Catholic Church, is that something that is common, or is that like an exception that happens sometimes? Um, how does that kind of look like in application?
As far as like intercommunion
Yeah.
between Catholic and Orthodox churches,
In
um,
the Chaldean rite in particular. Yeah.
I would say this, like, I didn't live particularly in Iraq. I didn't live um, in Baghdad and Mosul, where there was a lot of the apostolic Christians living in very close proximity with each other. And because they lived in very close proximity, on one corner, you'd have an Armenian church a Syriac Catholic Church, a Syriac Orthodox Church, Chaldean Catholic Church, and an Assyrian Church of the East, all just in one street.
Mm.
And you'd probably have all these people growing up together, living together, intermarrying with each other. And I think with all of this happening, the boundaries, I think, uh, weren't as clearly um,
Defined.
instituted and
Okay.
defined.
Mm.
I think for the sake of peace and for the sake of tolerance, I guess you could say, uh, they they might have like made the canonical. I don't know. I can't really assume what they did, but they would kind of have this term "maku faraq," or there is no difference between us. Um, and so, in that, I think as you move to America, uh, the the lines become a little bit more defined. Uh, Especially when anybody moves to America, you either assimilate and lose your identity, or you you come to be isolated to the point where you realize who you are even more. And so, for example, in where there's a Chaldean Catholic majority population, let's say like Michigan, San Diego, um, we we kind of have a robust offering of masses and churches and liturgies and youth groups, to the point where we might be hospitable to other apostolic Christians who maybe only have one mass in a language that they don't understand. So I think uh, this is where somebody says, like, well, I might not be Chaldean Catholic, but I benefit from the liturgical services and sacraments that are offered. And so for us, um, I think I think it really depends on the person who comes to church, and then also the individual church itself. I mean, for Catholics, normally any apostolic Christian, I mean, just from what I've learned in my experience, any apostolic Christian who comes to receive the Eucharist and believes and is in good standing with the church and is ready to receive the Eucharist in a dignified and holy way, they are welcome to receive the communion. However, I also know that there's other when you go to the maybe other Orthodox churches and apostolic Christians, I think what's more emphasized is, yes, we both believe that this is to be true, that this is the real body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, really present in what looks like bread and wine, but is actually the body and blood of Jesus. In order for us to also share in this um, liturgical meal together, which is communion, we have to have a faith communion, a communion in our faith. And I think in that, when it gets to that, we have to also agree that we are not completely united yet.
Mm.
We are united as in our shared baptism, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room, that our churches are not fully united just yet,
Mm.
and there are some things that we need to work out, and some things are just not in our hands, and some things we need to just take to prayer and to do our own part in to educating ourselves about the certain differences, and being uh, really understanding of and appreciative of the different um, kind of blossoming of the liturgical traditions, and not saying mine is better than yours or yours is better than mine. Both can exist as beautiful expressions of Christ, while I'm not talking about doctrinal issues, but I'm talking about more so liturgical stuff that exists. But I know that was a longer answer
No,
than
no, Bacchus, thank you so much. You went into very important things. uh, I think a lot of people wanted to know and hear about that in particular.
Mm.
It was actually bigger than the scope of what I originally intended the question to be, and it was better.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we also have to talk about like the what's it called, the leaps that were made. There was like intercommunion made between Pope John Paul II and the late um, um, Mardincha,
mm,
also, who they kind of acknowledge that, I think in their documents they had mentioned where, the places where there's more of Assyrian Church of the East, and a Chaldean church might not be available. uh, these two, groups of faithful can intercommune with each other, for the sake of convenience. um, and although the original anaphora of Edde and Mari doesn't have the epiclesis, which is the calling down of the Holy Spirit upon the gifts, um, or sorry, my bad, not that. Although it doesn't have the
towards
institution
the
narrative,
institution.
my
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah.
The institution narrative, where it says the priest kind of calls back the moments where Jesus says, "This is my body and this is my." Although it doesn't have that, it's
Mm.
implied throughout
But
the.
even your words, Rabi, even the epiclesis is implicit, not explicit.
How, where in the Assyrian Church of the
So
East?
yeah, so
How is it
in
implicit?
if you see the early anaphoras of Christianity, the early liturgical anaphoras, they're all implicit, and they don't become explicit until a little bit later in the
I'm
centuries.
talking about today in their
Yeah,
current
today
expression. They have an
I they
uh,
do. It's explicit.
expression where they say "Nephema," may your Holy Spirit come and rest upon me. Yeah,
It
uh,
rests up on it, but it says and change it into
that it
the
may become.
okay, okay, there we
Yeah,
go. So in the Syriac Orthodox version of the Anaphora of Mar ad-Day, there are the words of institution. I don't know if that's original to it. Um, it could be a later development to conform it to the rest of the anaphoras, you
yeah.
know. Um,
But so original Adde Mari doesn't have
yeah,
institution, but
that's
the
right.
other two anaphras, the secondary and tertiary anaphora,
Mhm.
um, they have the institution narrative.
Okay. Um, Now for the relations of the Church of the East and the Chaldean Catholic Church, it seems like right now they are much better than probably at any point um, in history since they have become two. Until now, I would say the relations are probably the best that they've been. To just see how the patriarchs interact with each other, kind of the how the priests interact with each other. It's not I don't feel like there's so much of a rivalry anymore from what I'm noticing. I don't know, I'm an outsider. Is that
Um,
something that you're noticing too? That
I wouldn't go like that far and say like it's the best it's ever been,
mhm,
just because I haven't lived in the past 400 years, um, where they were,
yeah,
uh, I, I mean, in our own lifetime, um, I guess we've experienced kind of like a roller coaster of,
mhm,
of you know, differences and kind of uh, rough patches, you could say. But there was a sense of glory days, which happened in maybe the 80s, 90s. Uh, but I think, again, it goes through rough patches, and we have certain leaders who emphasize certain things. And um, I think uh, I'm not really in the loop where, like, the progress we've sort of made, but I think there was a real kind of momentum in the 80s, 90s, like Pierre might be saying here. But there was really a pro Oriente dialogue which was happening. I think I have see these blue books right here. There
Mm,
was 5 sessions of dialogue between kind of really serious people from the Assyrian Church of the East, the Chaldean Catholic Church, and I think even the Eastern Congregation in Rome. I don't really know the details. I might just be kind of painting with broad strokes here, but these are real, like genuine fruits of an actual dialogue that's
mm.
happening, where certain things are needing to be ironed out. And I think this led to a lot of different things. But I could I could say that they're great in comparison to maybe what I don't know, but I think they're good now.
Okay, that's great. So
Ecclesially, let's say
yeah,
that.
yeah. Now, is there in the Church of the East tradition, so in Chaldeans, Assyrians, is there how in the Syriac Orthodox Church? You and I have talked about this before. I don't remember exactly the conversation, but like you know how in our church we have the Beth Gazo, so we have like the scales, the musical tones, right? That we it's very particular for the week. This week is in this tone, and it's been a long time tradition that we've had this since Saint Ephraim. It's said. So for the Chaldeans, is there a similar concept? Is there a like a particular tones you guys have to learn in order to chant certain rites or particular weeks?
I wouldn't say there's like specific tones
Mm,
that we chant everything, but we have um, hymns
mm.
that are composed in a certain structure.
Yeah.
So these are called resh qale,
Mhm.
and these resh qale are all the way uh, are are usually based on one hymn that is written, and then a bunch of other hymns are written according to that kind of, uh, let's say, the meter and the beats and the kind of musical scale it's written
Mhm.
in. So, for example, like if you were to say, look at a hymn and say, how do I sing this hymn? There's usually in the beginning, and usually red or something, it's called the resh qala. Then, if you are seasoned and experienced, you could say, I know this resh qala, and I can just go ahead and sing it,
Apply that hymn in that
apply
tone.
that hymn into this, because I
Mhm.
know the ups, downs, lefts, and rights,
Yeah.
how to sing it in that way.
Yeah. This
Now,
is this is
yeah,
the Bet Gazo. This is we call them Qlide. Yeah, keys.
keys, yeah,
Yeah. You get the key from the resh qala. You get that's the
correct.
key. You get the
It's like
key and
an
then
answer key.
mhm.
We
And
have that. It's called the resh qale, and it
yeah,
goes all the way from alap, beth, all the way to tau, which is that's how it's organized.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's funny because we've been ecclesiologically separated for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, if you count Syriac Orthodox with the Church of the East, whether Chaldean or Assyrian, doesn't like whatever the line is. So the Church of the East and the Syriac Orthodox, the break is dated at 484 AD. Now, that being the case, even with that, and we're all the way in 2024 now, but the concepts are so similar that we can function in each other's traditions because it's almost like it is speaking the same language, but it's like speaking the same language.
Yeah,
um
there's not much of a like shock factor
right.
when someone comes to in between like churches, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we have I think part of that is because of like this nostalgic part of liturgy.
Hmm.
And what do I mean by that? I think ultimately liturgy is, especially divine liturgy, is an entrance, is where heaven and earth meets. It is where um, it is the intersection between our time, which exists in the past, present, and the future, into God's eternal present, the eternal now, which is eternity, where time seems to stop. And I think the liturgy is kind of a vehicle for that to encounter to happen. And so for us, when someone comes to our church and is born and raised in the church and they hear La Khumara,
Mm.
the beginning of the mass, they're like, oh, this is familiar. This is great. I anticipated this. When they hear Adisha Alaha, this is great. Like they hear it sung in, like, this is the Trisagion. This is what they're used to, especially when it's in the tone they're used to. They get a sense of, oh my gosh, this is home. This is something that I can enter into. It's not foreign to me. And the nostalgic aspect helps the experience to happen.
Mm.
If we were to sing Qaddisha Alaha in our church according to the Syro-Malabar tone, which is very different,
Mm.
people would say, like, I know the words, but this is not a home.
Right.
Different.
Absolutely.
And it's not to say like one is good and one is bad, but one is mine and the other is someone else's,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
It's not to say like I can't have that same experience there, but this is the nostalgia that is experience that helps me, uh, helps lift me up into the divine.
Right.
So people come to the church anticipating to hear that in
Hmm.
their language, in their tones that they grew up in and that they're used to. So when the Syriac Catholics or the Syriac Orthodox, or maybe people that grew up back home and have experienced the Chaldean Catholic Church, when they come to the church and they hear me, and they hear the choirs and they hear the different ways of chanting and they hear the different ways of preaching, they'll come out of a liturgy and they say, Father, you brought me back to when I was a child, or when this certain priest did this liturgy back in this village or in this city.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm thinking to my head, I'm saying, did I bring you back to that moment? Or did this liturgy, you know, continue in eternity?
Yeah.
And
That's,
they feel they almost say, I didn't want it to end. They almost say, I I didn't even look at my phone. I didn't look at my watch. I didn't want this to end. And I think that is a taste of eternity that people get in their own home liturgies and churches. So
yeah. So it's a good point that you're saying our thing is not just language. People think if they're saying something in Syriac or chanting something in Syriac, that's it. That's not it. Like there was, I don't know if you remember Rabi, like a few years back, there was like this big deal over a Georgian priest, I think it was Georgian Orthodox or something, who was saying the
our
Qadisha
Father, yeah.
or what is it? Our Father,
He was
whatever.
chanting. I think you're talking about when the Pope went.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's the one. And oh, look at Aramaic. We're here. Why are you guys dying over this? We're already here. We're doing it every week, and we're
And
doing it how we do it. We're not doing it in like plugging it into like a Byzantine tone. We're doing it in our tone. You
yeah,
know?
oddly enough, although it was Aramaic, and
Yeah.
this, like, it might be kind of unpopular opinion, but um uh, when I heard it, I was like, is this Aramaic? First of all, I didn't know he was singing in Aramaic in Surah, like say.
Yeah.
And second of all, I had no sense of connection to it. Probably because he didn't have a sense of connection to I mean, I don't want to assume that. Let's not go there. But it didn't seem like authentic. It didn't touch me.
Yeah.
Not to say it wasn't beautiful.
Right.
I think many people thought it was beautiful, and I think it was great. But it's like having the difference between having your mom's dolma and having dolma made in like San Francisco by a Mediterranean fusion restaurant. It's
Exactly.
probably good if you never had your mom's dolma,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a great way to put it. Amazing.
It's
That clip should
beautiful
be
as an
cut.
isolated thing,
Yeah.
but it's just not authentic. I think
Absolutely.
according I wouldn't say authentic in the sense that Aramaic is to be sung according to the locality and of the region. Yeah. I
For
hear.
sure. So when we hear you, Rabi, you're in mass in liturgy, we're hearing your voice. So we hear, if I go to an Assyrian Church of the East or Syriac Orthodox, this is what I'm used to hearing. It's in this way of chanting. This is,
Mhm,
when he says, "My sheep hear my voice, and they know me."
mhm,
This is the voice of the Syriac people, of the Syriac speaking rites and churches, uh, whatever you want to, the Suraye, right? Um, so we know the voices of our shepherds. We know the tones that we pray in, the tones that we chant in. Um, for and maybe for the Western ear, it's like, okay, what's the big deal? Why are you guys making a big deal out of this, like the tones or the chanting? For us, it's a huge deal. It's very important.
because what's the risk? It's either I connect or I'm disconnected.
Mhm. Exactly, and like
Either
those
I'm
you.
encapsulated or I'm just an audience member,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Um, and when you've come to our parish before. I've come to yours. It's not like there's this kind of a huge thing of we need to kind of figure out or adapt to it's like we kind of know. We kind of know what's going on. It's easy to figure out what's happening when and where, and even though maybe the fonts could be different at sometimes, which by the way, for our Ramsha, we use the Eastern font. We read it in the Western accent, but we use the Eastern font in our
Mm.
parish. Just random detail.
Yeah.
So but for like people make a big deal out of it. Like I've seen Chaldeans who have told me they thought that we spell shlama using the wow instead of.
Mm,
I'm like, no, it's spelled the same. It's just a
all the
difference.
same.
Yeah, and uh, it's very, Father Andy. He put out an article on his blog. It was really good, actually, talking about like the whole ethnic thing, and uh, he he makes it very clear historically, like people would identify like either Jacobites or Nestorians or whatever, but he's like, we're the same people and these are just different fonts of the same language. um so it's people within our own churches, maybe they don't know how close we are to each other in terms of all of that stuff, in terms of the rite, the tradition, the heritage, like the parallels, the way we interpret scripture, Genesis and John and Saint Ephraim doing the sugiyatha, like the melacha ugayasa that you guys
Mhm,
do. um all of that, oganana, the hymn. It's these are treasures. They're so deep, and maybe we'll do episodes in the future just about that because that's how deep it is. um I'm doing Genesis right now in the Bible studies, and when I'm showing them these Ephraim parallels with Genesis and John, like their minds are blown because Western Christianity doesn't have that you know
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's it's beautiful to see the contributions that people are not normally used to hearing, that come from people like our saints and our church fathers. It's sometimes refreshing, and I think sometimes what's foreign is not always a put off, like we said earlier. Only when there's like an anticipation in the liturgy. But I think sometimes when something is foreign to us, it grasps us, and it's amazing to us. So I think when normally we think and we experience, and what's most accessible really to us is Western theology and ideas. When we hear something from the East, and something that's as dug and hidden and under the ground, like our own kind of spiritualities in the Church of the East and the Syriac rites, uh, it's a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. Yeah. It, I think. Do you feel like in the Chaldean Church there is kind of an um is there like a renaissance kind of need for this, let's reorient ourselves, no pun intended, to the Orient, and kind of to be, you know, maybe let's read Ephraim. We love Augustine, but let's read Ephraim right now. Let's read Narsai. Let's. Oh, by the way, with Narsai, you does the Chaldean Church also chant Od Nurani too?
Yeah, oh yeah,
They,
but
oh,
different.
yeah. So the Syriac Orthodox, we say Saint Jacob of Suruj wrote it. The Church of the East says Narsai wrote it. Regardless, I think it's really cool that both of our churches have that hymn.
Mhm.
Um, it's ancient. So my point is, in the Chaldean rite, is there kind of that view of, let's maybe uh, emphasize our Easternness or our Eastern fathers, or is it more balanced,
Um,
or does it depend on the parish or the priest?
so I would say before you kind of talk about um, the return to like being authentically Chaldean Catholic, you could say, or authentically just grabbing what was trying to be passed on to us.
Mm,
We have to also acknowledge that uh, being an Eastern Catholic, uh, when you move, and when you're kind of in your own land, and when you move to another country and you're an immigrant, it's hard to kind of identify what you are, because what do I tell you what I am, right? Am I Catholic? Am I Roman Catholic? Am I Eastern Catholic? Am I Orthodox? Because first of all, when I tell people, yeah, I'm Chaldean Catholic, we speak Aramaic, they're like, oh, so like you guys are Maronites. I'm like, no, we're different. Um, and then when you talk to someone else and you're like, yeah, my family's from the border of Iraq and Turkey, and they're like, and I'm Catholic, and they say, oh, so like you're a Catholic Muslim. I said no. So people don't get it, right? And we also are wondering, like, where do we fit in this whole thing? And we in the church, we tend to pick up certain things that are kind of like a cross pollination, you could say. Like we we tend to pick up devotions like the Rosary, the Eucharistic adoration, devotions to certain saints, novenas. These are not, uh, we could say, from our own liturgical upbringing.
mm,
This is something that we picked up from another rite and from
mm,
another tradition.
mm.
It's not to say they're bad. It's
No.
not to say they're not good, but these exist as a cross pollination where we benefit from them, and they've kind of been integrated into our own spirituality, right? It's not to say what we offer, and I'll say partially for me as an American-born Chaldean Catholic priest. Here's what was most accessible to me as like a teenager. What was most accessible to me first was, let's say we had English Mass. That was the first time where I can say I understood, connected, and was able to pray in a language I understood, and with the priest who connected with me in speaking English. But if I wanted to go pray at home, I needed to learn Aramaic. I needed to learn Surah. I needed to learn how to read and write, which majority of us didn't know how to do that. And even when we did read and write, we wouldn't understand half the words we're saying.
Yep.
Right. So the forms of piety that my parents would normally have, and the people in the villages would normally have, were just completely inaccessible to me.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing that is easy to do is to pick up a rosary and to pray it. And to learn from someone else who can pray it in English, and my grandma could teach me in Surah, and I can pick that up pretty easily.
Yeah.
As a normal form of piety, I'm talking about separate from the scriptures, right?
Right.
Which sometimes seem daunting to read as a kid, let's say.
Yeah.
So, going into the seminary, we were taught to pray, and specifically the seminary that I was in was called Mar Abba, the Great Chaldean Catholic Seminary, which was established by Bishop Sarhad Jammo in I don't know what year, but there in that seminary was established because it recognized the need to have a more genuine sense of like upbringing as Chaldean Catholics, kind of rooted in who we are in our identity as Chaldean Catholics per se, so that we can give a unique and really authentic form of our own rights to the people. And the reason why is because if you come to a Chaldean Catholic church or any Eastern Rite church, and we're sounding, singing, and praying just like a Roman Catholic church, we're probably going to do it worse than them, right? And one, it's just not going to feel right. It's not going to seem right. So here, there is sort of like, just in this corner of the church, I'll say, I'm not going to say anywhere else, but just in this corner, in our eparchy, in our diocese, we had that sort of need for us being just authentically who we are. And I'm not saying that we throw away everything else that we've received, like the rosary or anything like that. No, we don't do that, but we hold on to those as good ways we could be enriched spiritually, but also knowing that the church is now making accessible to us the things that were once inaccessible that can actually enrich our faith, enrich our prayer, like the morning prayers and evening prayers, and the hymns that we used to sing in Surah, and now we can sing them in English but with the same tones. All of these are now accessible to us, and now they're being given to the people. So now the kids and the adults are seeing this coming together of the hymns they used to hear in Surah and they're used to, but they're bringing their kids to the English Mass and the English liturgies, and they're hearing Oganana, but in English. Oh, like they're hearing it in that tone. And it's just this beautiful intersection of we don't need everything to just be in Surah or Syriac or in the original language to be authentic.
Got it.
We recognize this need, and I don't know if you remember taking this class. I think some of you might not know this, but me and Shamash and Daniel were in school together online at Agora for a little bit. But you remember Father Michael Sorial? He wrote that book.
Yeah.
I forget. I think it's called Incarnational Exodus, where he describes Eastern churches in three different ways, right? There's the um, there's the ethnocentric church, there's the ideocentric church, and then there's the Christocentric church.
Right.
Um, and so the problems of the ethnocentric church is that you have to be that specific ethnicity in order to be inaugurated and a full member of the church, in order to experience its fullness. Like you have to be Greek, you have to eat gyros, and you have to watch My Big Fat Greek Wedding, in order to really feel like you're part of the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
That's the same way with us. Like you have to be. They say, "Oh, we baptize him Chaldean, or we baptize him Assyrian, or we baptize this person this way," before they actually are here for the theological and spiritual reasons, right? And then there's the ideological church, which I think you described as, existing in the Slavic churches, where they're always like in their ideas, they exist as people that are oppressed, right? As people who are victims. And so the only way to kind of connect spiritually with God and the church is if they enter through that victim mentality when, hey, we're not persecuted anymore in the West. Hey, we're experiencing times of freedom. And there's other ways we can pray. So he was kind of carving out this new way forward for Coptic churches, but really any any Eastern church which is pretty homogeneously ethnic, where we're only kind of mostly one ethnicity, and kind of closed in on ourselves, right? He was saying that it's a shame that we see our churches in the West as only able to serve our own people, which misses out on the real mission of the gospel. Because what's the real mission of the gospel is to go out and to spread the gospel to all nations.
All right.
So if people come to the church that I'm at, which is Mar Abraham here in Scottsdale, and there's only space for like Surai, let's say, people of my own ethnicity, then I think as long as I'm not failing my own people, if I'm doing that first, let's say, and I'm not able to be open to be able to receive the local people, I think our ethnic churches are failing in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because let me say this last point, I'll let you keep going because I talk a lot.
Yeah, no.
If our goal is just to preserve, we will end up losing what we preserve in that pursuit.
What you're saying, it's kind of the flip of the point of the Georgian guy. Sorry, we'll keep bashing this Georgian guy, but it's not on purpose. It's not
like a paradigm now.
Yeah, it's just an example. It's like not only is it like, okay, here's kind of this attempt at our language, plus the tone is completely off. You just made the point, and you're right. Even the language isn't the end all be all anyway.
Yeah.
It's, even if we're doing it in English, but we're doing it like we do it. Like if we're doing Oganana in the Syriac Orthodox Church, we have Altar Ikayeto. I don't know if you heard, like, from your doors old church, and we have that in English now in that same tune. So this is something that it's still from the same hands that are cooking. It's the same mother making the same dolma. It's still coming from that same touch. So you mentioned Agora earlier. Malfono Michael Winger, remember?
Yeah.
He texted me while we're on. He goes, "It might be helpful for the viewers if you can point out that liturgical Aramaic, like classical Syriac, and the modern vernaculars, Surat, are not always easy to understand. So in your experience, then, like if someone's fluent in Surat, or they speak Surat, and the church, let's say if they're not, like La Khumara is not in Surat, it's in Syriac, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
It's in the scholastic like
yeah,
yeah,
Lishana Atiqa,
yeah.
whatever it's
There's
called.
a bunch of different names for it.
Right. So the classical Syriac language versus the vernacular modern colloquially spoken. Um, how is the relationship in your experience between the laity um, and using this?
So today,
Hmm.
today, um, most, if not most of the liturgy today, if I say it, let's say there's a Surah Mass happening, 95% of it is in the vernacular.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah.
95% is in the vernacular. There's
Hmm.
probably 3 prayers that I can think of that are in the like scholastic
Hmm.
sopraya, they say, or the older, it's not
Syriac.
necessarily the older
Yeah.
language. It's just a language that was developed in a school. So
Right.
that, it wasn't
Yes, sir.
never a spoken language.
Sure.
La Khumara, Qadisha Alaha, and sometimes Mara Isha as well. So
Okay.
those 3 hymns are only in, like, kind of preserved, you could say, or left in its original form in the scholastic Syriac, you could say. Um, but even like, to be honest, anybody that speaks Surah nowadays, whether they're from a village that says this is the most pure form of Surah or whatever, most people just that speak because they learned from home and they didn't actually really learn the language. There's a lot of words that they don't understand. There's a lot of words that they can't get because even if it's written in the vernacular, there's complex terms that are written that you need a dictionary for. That
Because they don't have Surat academia. They're not
yeah,
exposed. Yeah.
anytime they need to think more abstractly and articulate themselves more clearly, they're not going to use a surah word. They're going to use a crutch,
Hmm.
which is going to be either whatever they learned locally, which is Arabic, they're going to learn Turkish, or they're going to learn English or Kurdish or whatever their local language is.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. And
So even
yeah.
the vernacular liturgy is not, yeah.
Yeah, the what we have in the Syriac Orthodox Church officially, we still use only Syriac, not vernacular, officially speaking, like in all the books and everything. Now, depending on the parish you go to, you might find a priest mixing in some Fusha Arabic, you might find some Turkish, you might find surat of both kinds, the Eastern or the Western suit, like the vernacular of either one might be like if you go to Bartella, for example, you might see vernacular surat being mixed into the liturgy there. But
Mhm,
officially, everything is officially still in, we call it Ktobonoyo, or like the Syriac, right? And like some New Testaments have been published in vernaculars and things, but they're not used liturgically. They're not like officially approved or whatever. It's just like private endeavors of people doing things like that. Um, the Syriac Orthodox Church seems to be very conservative in this kind of thing, um, but they are not against translations. It's more, I think it's more so to preserve, maybe to have that rule, and then keep the base and then kind of build on it with other things. We have a question here for you, Rabi. I'm sure you get this question all the time. So the question is about uh, the Greek fathers that you guys venerate on the calendar, I think you guys just say like the Greek fathers. I don't think you particularly name them. I'm not sure if you do. If you say the anaphora of so and so, the anaphora of so and so, anaphora of Theodore Nestorius, whatever.
Yeah.
Or yeah, how does that work?
Well, let's look here.
Yeah.
So, at some point in the year, we have a memorial or commemoration of what's known as the Greek Fathers, which I think at some point would have been, I think, Nestorius and Theodore Mopsuestia and someone else.
Theodore of Tarsus.
Yeah, but we today, I don't think we mentioned them particularly.
Okay.
But we do attribute the secondary and tertiary anaphoras. Like we have the like our I think one anaphora is by Theodore Mopsuestia, and then one anaphora is by attributed to Nestorius.
Okay, and
But
Isaac
written by Nestorius, it's very similar, if not identical, to the writing and the style of what's it called? St. John Chrysostom.
Okay, and that would make sense. Constantinople. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Rabi. I think you guys also have, because I noticed it in the Emmanuel book. I think you guys also have Saint Jacob of Saruj, who's from our tradition.
As like venerated in our church.
I don't know. It said like Saint Jacob of Saruj, and it had a prayer from him in the Emmanuel.
I don't know if he's like included in our in our martyrology, or what's hagiography, is that what it's called? I don't know if he's included in the hagiography that we have, but what I do know is that we have certain prayers that we have from him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like even that, I think on Easter we read the announcement that he makes. Every Feast of the Resurrection, we read that. I think it's attributed to Saint Jacob of Suruj. Yeah.
And I think Marcel had in the I don't know if he wrote the introduction or if it was Father Andy. I don't know who wrote the introduction there. I can't remember. But Saint Michael the Great, who was the patriarch of the Syriac Orthodox Church at the end of the beginning of the second millennium, around that time, he's cited multiple times in the Emmanuel also. I just think that's really interesting that you guys incorporated like a little bit from us in there too. That's really cool.
Like I said, there's a lot of cross pollination that happens.
Right.
Just like if our moms hung out, they would learn ways to make keleche and
exactly. Exactly. Well, I want to thank you, Rabi. I appreciate your time. I know you're very busy. For a priest to come on this, it's a big deal. So thank you so much, and pray for me. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, and I pray for all of your viewers and the work that you do here.
If there's anything you want to plug, go for it.
I don't really have much to plug, besides anybody who's listening to you. I'm sure they're from a certain apostolic church, or maybe they're inquisitive and just learning about the different apostolic churches, and I'm sure they know your background and your history and where you come from, and the leaps and bounds that God has made in your life, and going from the evangelical background and finding your home in a church that is apostolic, and you find your life in the sacraments. I think the only thing that I can plug right off of my mind is us. We call the qurbana, we call the Eucharist qurbana, right? And the root word for qurbana is to draw near. And so a lot of times when we say we're going to church, we say we want to get closer to God. But really, when you go to the qurbana, it's God coming closer to you. And when you take your first step towards Christ in the Eucharist, who is there fulfilling his promise that he'll be with you until the end of time, you take that first step, Christ runs to you to be close and to accompany you and to sanctify you and to make you into his new creation. So I wish I had more to plug, I guess, but I think what usually is the heart and what St. John Paul II says is the source and summit of the Christian life is the qurbana, is the Eucharist. And so I hope you find your satisfaction, your fulfillment, your daily bread, your eternal life in Christ who's present in the Eucharist. And so God bless you all. God bless you, Shamasha Daniel. And I pray for all your viewers and everybody that you have, that you serve, and that you can reach their hearts.
Thank you so much again. So everybody, Father Peter, he plugs the liturgy. He plugs the mass. Everyone go to mass. Go
On Sunday.
Pray. On Sundays, receive Holy Communion.
Yeah.
Confess and commune. Thank you again, Rabi, and take care, everybody. Pray for us.
Pray for me. Yeah. Bye-bye.